family history. I got to make some history too. I was with Grandpa on the 3rd of November of 2014. And this is your host, Nathen, speaking. Your captain for the evening. And I think we're just going to jump right into this. Topic is teen years.
Juvenile delinquency.
Juvenile and adolescence, acne, the whole 9 yards. All right.
Yeah.
So we're just going to jump right into it, I think. I have a few questions to start off with, and I think I'm just going to start spitballing, and then
go for it.
We'll figure it out. My first question is about dating in your teen years. Were you more of a hopeless romantic or a womanizer? AKA, were you one to find one girl and fall in love, or did you make the rounds? We'll call it.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
No, I was a sort of a kind of a lone wolf kind of a guy. I was not Mr. Joe Popular, but I was also not a sort of a back there in the corner, stick in the mud, never in the middle of anything kind of a thing either. That's an interesting question. The answer is partially related to the fact that for several of the years, in fact, for all my teen years, I was really in an interesting school situation. We moved from New York City to a little tiny town, 500 population town, with a very small college in it of another 500 students.
And that was when your dad was getting his degree there.
No, he already had his degrees.
Oh.
He only went, in those days you were pretty good if you got through a master's degree, which he did. And he was teaching at this small little college, and when we moved in, it was in the fall of 1941, literally weeks before World War II started. December 7th was, of course, Pearl Harbor Day, and we moved into this little tiny town from New York City, and I was at that time, let's see, 41, I was 12 years old. So that's the beginning of the time period that you're really talking about. The interesting thing about those years was that instantly we all were rationed as far as gasoline is concerned, and a lot of foods we were rationed on. We didn't get a chance. My father didn't have a car when he first went there. He bought a car sometime after that, but he didn't have freedom to go anywhere. He managed to get a little bit of a freedom to teach in Buffalo, New York, which was 70 miles away, on Saturdays. He would go up there and teach on Saturdays.
So you made that 70-mile trek 70 mile to there or round trip?
No, 70 miles to there.
So 140 miles round trip right. Every Saturday.
That's right. That's
wow.
Right. And it was a time when you were in a small little town like that, you knew everybody.
Yeah.
The high school that I was going to was a private school. It was affiliated with the college in that little town. And so everybody knew everybody to begin with. That has a very interesting impact on the relationship of dating.
Yeah, that's what I'm sure.
Everybody knows everybody to begin with. You don't sort of have the opportunity to have much exclusivity in terms of your relationship.
That's true.
You're saying that it was pretty, just by proximity, everybody dated everybody at some point?
Well,
Or it was just, it was...
It tended to be more that way than it certainly is now, yeah. Certainly, yeah.
I mean, your dating pool is just much smaller.
Very small.
I mean, to give an idea, do you remember how big your graduating class was?
I didn't graduate there.
Okay. But do you remember how big the classes were?
The classes, I think there were maybe a dozen or less people in my class. Very small. Very, very small class.
Wow.
And I remember that I dated the daughter of one of the other professors at the university. And of course those were the years when the youthful blood starts to get moving a little bit more than you were used to in your childhood years, and so it was an interesting time. I just sort of had whatever, get out there and have fun. There weren't things like dances. It was a church related college.
Oh.
And the whole town was a church related town.
So.
And it was not a dancing town. There was one grocery store. It was a general store, literally.
Wow.
And one gas station at that store.
Wow.
So and we were locked in because of the war.
Yeah.
We didn't get around and travel to independent school districts down the road a piece and so forth.
Yeah, gas rationing would have immediately shot
it precluded us moving or going anywhere. And so I grew up in those years teenage-wise. My father ended up finishing his years there literally the summer that the war ended.
Wow.
1945. And my father and his brother, my brother had some influence in a private school in New England, a prep school, one of the all-boy prep schools of the time. And so he and my father arranged to send my brother and me, but this is my senior year, to that school. I didn't come from the kind of education background where I did very well in that school. It was a boys' school.
Yeah.
There was a girls' school across the river. Yeah. And there were some social things arranged.
Uh-huh.
So my boyhood time, my growing up time, was not exactly what you consider a normal time at all in terms of dating.
Or like social interactions with girls, it sounds like at all. I mean, like it doesn't really sound like I don't know, it sounds like it would have been a little weird to have I don't really know where I'm trying to go with this.
It sounded like there was limited chance for encounters as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
very limited.
Yeah.
Very limited.
Random question for you. Which one of you was the better ladies' man, you or Leon?
Me.
Okay.
By a long shot.
Done.
Okay, there's got to be a story behind that.
And you know, my brother may see this at some time, but I think he would agree. I think he would agree with that. I don't think, for one thing, those years are so far behind us now. What difference does it make? Yeah. But I think that that's the reality of it. Yeah.
Did you ever steal a girl from Leon?
Did I what?
Did you ever steal a girl from Leon?
Don't recall that I ever did.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall that he ever stole one from me either.
Well, come on, Grandpa's pretty sleazy, but he's not that sleazy.
That sleaze didn't work in those days.
Let's be real. Oh, I did have a question. So you guys were living in like upstate New York, right? Kind of.
Sort of western upstate New York, yeah.
Did you? Yeah. What newspaper did you guys get?
Say it again?
What newspaper did you guys get? I mean,
we didn't get any newspaper.
You didn't get a newspaper?
No, the only news that we got, and the only information source we had for the outer world, the world beyond and outside, was radio.
That's what I was thinking.
And in those days, radio was the medium. That was the only medium.
Thing,
Of course, there were motion pictures, but not in that town. There weren't any
And it
motion
was
pictures.
probably all pretty low fidelity. Like it was probably, I'm guessing it was all AM.
It was all AM.
All AM.
FM didn't come into existence until really post-war, about 10 years after World War II. Yeah. FM was really just beginning to come in. Chicago was, I think, the location where it began to come in, and it didn't come in until about 1950, maybe a little bit before that, but late 40s, maybe 1950. So, yeah, low quality AM, but of course, if it's all you got, it's all you know.
That's all you got, man.
That's right.
I mean, yeah.
So my upbringing as far as dating is concerned was not exactly what we would in any kind of a way, certainly in today's time, be called normal.
Is there any, I mean, do you remember any of your girlfriends?
Joanne Fancher.
Wow, alright, we got names.
Louise Fasco. Yeah, but they're just names that I remember. I honestly don't remember too much. There was one gal I remember, she was a good kisser. And I used to enjoy that. But I can't remember her name anymore. And of course we didn't have cars that I could drive around.
Exactly, that's what I was about to ask. Like, what were dates like? Because it was during the war, so it was
like?
I mean, even if it wasn't during the war, it's not like you really would have had a car at your disposal, right? And
not at all.
I mean, you said 500-person town. Were there parks to go to?
No.
Were there, like? No. So what did you do for recreation on a, what did you really go on dates, or was it just kind of like a?
Well, it was sort of like a little country town. 500 people in a town, and the nearest town was probably about 15 miles away, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 miles away. And there were lots of country and woods around. There was a lot of walking around you could do, but that's about it. You didn't have much hiding place to go and
yeah.
Do whatever you do, you know?
Didn't do thing.
Yeah. Eloquently put, sir.
Yeah, that was interesting. Yeah, I don't know, that's interesting.
A little different than you have it right now.
A little bit different.
Just a little bit.
I mean, so there's obviously more people in NYC than there were where you moved to. I mean, you didn't really... Yeah. When did you start dating, I guess?
Really, it didn't happen until I started college.
Really? So...
That's really true.
Was that the same age, like 18?
Well, I started college when I was 17.
Okay.
Graduated from high school when I was 17, and literally 10, 12, 14 days later, I was in summer school at Kent State University, which in those days nobody knew where it was, but of course Kent State University, everybody knows where it is now in Ohio. But that's where my father was then teaching. He started teaching there.
That's pretty cool. I mean, there's probably more on there. Let me see if I just had anything else. I mean...
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, just so we can beat a dead horse on this whole girl thing, I guess, is there anything that, based on, I guess, the practices and, I guess, the dating process that you went through when you were going through college and going through that, and seeing what it's like today, or you just getting even a glimpse of it, what do you think has been lost, or what do you think is just the most, what do you think is something that is lost to this generation that should be important and kept up?
That's a good question.
I
mean, I can probably answer this
You may
question.
want to stop the camera for about 20 minutes. Let me think about that. Don't do that. But that really is an interesting question.
I could probably answer that. I feel like...
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, I want to hear his point. I want to hear both your
yeah,
points.
no,
Yeah,
I mean, if you got something, go for it. I think it would be more along the lines of, like, there's much less emphasis. I think relationships now are a lot more. Well, first of all, I think they're a lot less physical. Not in the sense, well, not like sexual, but I think it's much different now being able to sustain a relationship over thousands of miles than it is. I think I think that's something that's really interesting. And I mean, how much access did you have to a telephone?
Not a lot.
Not a lot.
Not a lot at all. No, I think that to answer the question that you raised, there was obviously in those days a greater simplicity of life. There was not so much, to put it bluntly, there wasn't so much stuff in life. Now we take it for granted, our children take it for granted, you all take it for granted that cars are available, that computers are available, that telephones are available on a multiplicity of foundations and platforms. And communications, if anything, you have a surfeit of it. You have so much of it, you probably don't know how to use it all. You have to be selective about what you can use from. In those days, we had so little.
I think
we had radio, and believe me, radio was a very, very powerful force. I think I may have in one of the other conversations that I've had, I think I may have spoken to it, but it's worth speaking again to the fact that radio, unlike television, which gives you a visual connection to a narrative, whether it's a story or whether it's just news reporting, you had the visual. But when everything has to be portrayed verbally to the ears, the ear mind, and you don't have any kind of a picture, your imagination plays.
That's true.
And the imagination is a very, very powerful, the response of your imagination is just amazing when all you have is stories that come through your ears.
Yeah, I mean, that's reminding me of the whole, I mean, this is not, it's not directly related, but I mean, it is kind of the whole fiasco that happened when they had that broadcast at the War of the Worlds, that people...
That was powerful.
Yeah, that would, like...
It was
that's the
really
thing, because, like,
powerful.
Things like that wouldn't happen now, because people would,
No, they know better. We all know better. We've all seen the fantasy that can be created by all the visual things that we see, and it's all fantasy, so much of it is.
And so do you think that really the lack of visual stimulation and the need for your imagination to kind of create, an image of its own, do you think that being lost on this generation has, affected, creativity or...
Yeah, I do.
Anything?
Yeah, I do. Because, as a matter of fact, stimulation-wise, your visual, your mind's ability to be visually stimulated, I think, was even greater in that time than it is now. Now, we've seen everything.
Exactly.
By the time you've grown up to the age you are now, you've seen just about everything.
Oh, and I mean, for kids that are growing up now, it's even like, they're... When I was born, it was like, we were just coming out with rudimentary CGI techniques and things like that, and now it's like, we can make anything in a movie happen.
That's right.
That's right. For kids growing up,
unbelievable what they can do. Right. And in those days, I was a great reader. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of reading, and I used to love adventure and travel stories. I remember one book which was a powerful force in my imagination. It was a book about one of the explorations to the North Pole, and about the crew that suffered and and had to go without, figure out how to survive,
Mhm.
and they did. But the story was powerfully stimulating to the imagination, and that's just reading it. You know, there was no television. We never saw it. We never saw a movie. We went to movies. There weren't any movies in that town,
cinemas, yeah.
and there was no way to get to a town where there were movies. Movies existed. We just didn't go to them. That's all.
That's kind of a really good segue into my second question that I've written, and that's like in the day that I grew up in, you know, I was constantly surrounded and just bombarded with, you know, multimedia and advertising everywhere I went. You know, it's like first of all, the fact that we had TVs is you know, comparatively, it's incredible. And then second of all, you know, for every 5 minutes of TV, you have a 3-minute advertising break, which, you know, you have people telling you what to buy, you know, for 3 minutes straight. So I was wondering what you think would have been different about you if you had that when you grew up, like the whole consumerism, I guess is the right word. The whole the consumerist society that we live in now, you know, where everything is
We really do.
so based on not necessarily materialism, but just, you know, things that you have to have, whether they be digital or physical, you know. And so I was just wondering what you think that the lack of that for you had an impact on.
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I not having had it, it's hard to imagine what it would have been like in terms of influence on my life, in terms of how it would change how I grew up. It's hard to imagine. And maybe I really haven't in my own life given enough thought to that difference. In terms of your generation and my children's generations even.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a vast difference. There is
Yeah.
a vast difference there. I don't know.
I mean, do you think it made you, I mean, because there's always been advertising, as long as there's been people
Right.
making products, you know, whether
Sure.
or not I think the difference between when you were in your teen years or growing up and when I was growing up is that it's been all around me, and part of that is because I live in a major city, but I kind of forgot where I was going with this. What do you think? Where was I going with this? This is tough.
To come back to that, the
Yeah.
imagination that was stimulated in my time was in many respects, I think probably even more greatly stimulated because there was nothing to tell you and show you and bombard you, literally, as we have in today's culture.
Yeah.
There was nothing to hit you all the time with the obvious. We, I think, really ended up developing more of a fertile imagination, but just by virtue of the fact that we just did not have all this visual stimulation and the stimulation of constant advertising. Advertising existed, but believe me, on radio, it was nothing like it is now.
Yeah.
Nothing like it is now. There would be a single product that would be the sponsor of a half-hour or a 1-hour radio broadcast, like a radio drama. There would be one product, and then they may talk about it 3 times or 4 times. What's it like now in an hour?
It's like, you know, it's like within the hour you talk about
well,
it 20 times.
I think they only allow you something like 48 minutes out of an hour for a program, something like that.
It's nuts
Nowadays. So that tells you something about it.
Exactly. I mean, we have TV shows that are only, you have 1 hour episodes where it's only actually run for 42 minutes.
That's right.
And then
That's
you
right.
have, 18
That's
minutes
right.
of commercials.
That's right.
I remembered what I was going to say. Do you think that growing up without all these advertisements when you were growing up has made you, like, me growing up around all these advertisements has made, I'm not sure if this is just how I was raised because my dad is an engineer and he's always questioning things, but I'm more skeptical of advertisements than than a lot of other people that I know. Do you think, well, it's just kind of, do you think that you would be less or more consumeristically inclined? I think I just made up a word there. But
If we had that kind of
if you had
advertising at that time,
exactly, like, do you think you would think about buying things differently?
Are you?
I think I can answer your question. I don't think I would have. I don't think my imagination or the possibilities of things,
Uh-huh.
the possibilities of what I could do, the possibilities of what I could experience. I don't think my imagination would have been anywhere near as fertile as it really ended up being. A lot of I'm in the business of creating sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that I would have had the stimulation to think in that kind of a way would be the same if I had had my sensory stimulation like we're really talking about, constantly stimulated like your generation does. I don't really think that. I think that I'm glad that I didn't have it I wasn't overburdened with stimulation. I really am.
Yeah, I mean, it's two completely different worlds.
It is two different worlds.
I have a third question that's I think we kind of.
Go for it.
I mean, are we done with this?
I think so.
I think we're pretty
I
much.
think so.
I think I'm running out of things to talk about there. My third question isn't much of a question, but it has more underlying tones than it. The question is, were kids less fat? And I think the question really, I think what I was thinking of at the time was, now we have all these, we have laboratories full of people trying to create better tasting food that isn't actually, it may not be better for you, or, it might be worse for you, but it's better tasting. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So, do you think that the lack of that, do you think that the distinct lack of that in your childhood growing up, around you and in your own life, was there, basically what was it like not having all this really crappy food around you? I mean, you guys ate better than most kids these days.
We ate very well.
Exactly.
We really ate very well. My father and mother, my mother was born on a farm, a dairy farm to be sure, but it was a self-sufficient food enterprise, both for meat and milk and dairy products, as well as for gardening and so forth. So my mother knew gardening inside and out. We had a garden when we lived in this little town, Houghton, New York. We had a garden right next to the house. It was a big one, and she worked that garden. She and my father too, when he could. But mostly she worked that garden, and once in a while, my brother and I got out there and worked that garden, and we ate very healthily. And no, there were not fat kids everywhere. There were not fat kids anywhere. We were all pretty much skinny kids.
It's funny to think about now because it's such a huge deal these days. It's just really mainly in the United States. It's just that there's there's an industry around weight loss, and we need to stop feeding our kids all this crappy food, and it's like it's perplexing to people, like, how do we make ourselves less skinny? And it's, even though the answer is so obvious, I mean, when you were growing up, it was just, that was all there was. You just ate. You ate well, even if you may not have had a lot of food. It was the food that you had was good, I'm assuming.
What has happened in the time since I grew up as a schoolboy is that we were not at that time a consumerist society.
Exactly.
We are now a consumer society. And the place in the world that has developed consumerism to the highest state of art, if you want to put it in those terms, is the country that we live in. Consumerism was really refined as a system in this country. Other countries have adapted it and adopted it and do it in their own way, but we are the ultimate kings of consumerism, and it came after I grew up.
And I think that's one of the most interesting things that you said, is because your mom was, your mom she liked to garden, and it was also, I'm assuming, that was a quite significant source of food for you guys.
Oh, it really was.
I mean,
no question about that.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that that's a really interesting difference now, is that the people, as our whole country developed into a more consumer society, I think that it's interesting to see how the food industry has also combined with that consumerism idea, and kind of how now, because the people that are making the most profit off of the food aren't making good food. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to see, because I mean, obviously your mom wasn't making any profit off of the food, she was just making it.
She was making profit. I mean, I would argue.
Sure, we didn't spend the money that would have otherwise had to be spent because we had it in the
I
country.
mean, you weren't selling the food to
No.
other people.
No,
That's
no.
that's really
We gave
what I'm
a lot
getting
away.
at. Exactly.
We gave a
But
lot away.
It's mainly what I'm getting at is like, the people that were selling food then probably weren't making as much of a killing as the people are
No.
now. So
No.
I think it's interesting that.
No.
I have a question, and I
Shoot.
want to kind of just 86 this for the moment. I want to go back to imagination, and in terms of imagination, using it and exploring it, what kind of pranks did you pull as a teenager? That's what I want to know. I want to hear good ones.
I was about to get to that, kind
Pranks.
I know you got one. I know you got one on Leon.
of. He stole his girl, man.
Oh yeah.
Well, I don't know you'd call this a prank. It was a little bit of ingenuity that my brother and I practiced. You know what we don't have snow around here, and so we don't have sleds.
What's
Yeah, what snow? You both have grown up in Texas, but in snow country up in the north, which we had plenty of,
imagine.
sleds were an important part of our life in the wintertime. We could do it all, had an awful lot of fun going downhill, and there were hills. The college, as a matter of fact, was on a hill above the town, and the road coming down was like literally like this, going down the hill, and my brother and I had been given what was then known, and I think they still make them, flexible flyer sled.
Oh, yeah.
And they, it's a board top, and they have the handle, and then the runners come all the way down and they fold back.
Talking about
Well, my brother and I-
toboggan kind of thing.
Pardon?
Like a toboggan kind of thing.
No, toboggan is the board is right on the snow.
I mean, but it wasn't. Oh, I see what you mean.
There
like
are
it has
runners.
the two
There are
little
steel
okay.
runners. That's right.
But they weren't. None of this was plastic, right? I
Oh no,
mean,
no.
Yeah,
Wood, steel.
wood and steel.
And so my brother and I got this crazy idea that only one person can get on a sled at a time, but there's a way if we take it apart and make it longer.
Really?
We could make a big sled out of it, and so we literally cut it in half, and we got I forget how we did it, but we bent the runners where we had cut the runner off. We bent it up so it would make a new slide forward angle to the runner, and then put the front part on another one and put a long board on. So 2 or 3 of us would get on and go down the hill together.
Nice.
And it worked. That was we were pretty good rascals of that kind of thing. You know, you couldn't go out and buy something. You couldn't get to a place to buy it to begin with anyway. The wartime made it impossible to travel around and go to a store.
Yeah.
So we just make do with what we got.
Well, I mean, it's not like a whole lot of steel would have been available.
I was into styles. My mother had a sewing machine. And I had a jacket, I remember once, a suit jacket, that I thought, you know, it'd be much cooler if it fit me and with my shape. And so I thought, I'll be real clever about this. And so I took it, you know, you can figure out how you take the seams and get a sewing machine and make a thread and tuck it in a little bit more there and so forth. So I had a very nice tight-fitting jacket when I got done with that sewing machine. Stuff like that. You know, it's the kind of thing that to answer your question, I think you want more trouble than I really got into, but you know, we used to be inventive about things like that a lot.
I mean,
Sorry, I'm projecting a little bit. I mean, I was a little bit of was there really any trouble to get into in
Not
such
much.
a small town? I mean, it didn't
Not
really
much.
sound like. I mean, there's the whole. I remember there's that story about all the sweet potatoes falling off of the back of that truck.
That was in New York
That
City.
was in New York City.
That was
though.
in New York City, yeah.
And that, I mean, I'm just imagining that happening today, and like, you know, something falls off of the back of a truck and someone just runs up and takes it. You know, they get their.
That's right.
Get their
Made
ass
a couple of
beat,
days'
but-
meals out of it.
Exactly. You guys were just.
Yeah. Oh, we really made our fun, I guess, is one way of answering the question. We really made our fun. We ended up getting bicycles, and I'm going to tell you, we bicycled all around the countryside, all around town, certainly. We couldn't go very far because it was just not smart to do that. I mean, you were out of town, you go 5 minutes that direction, you're out of town, you go 5 minutes the other direction, you're out of town. And there's only one road going through. So,
I'm guessing these were pretty heavy bicycles.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
they
big
were-
fat tires,
Yeah.
big fat
and
tires, big fenders, torpedo lights, battery powered lights
Yeah,
on the
and I'm
fender,
thinking, like,
and
the
tanks in between.
The
and-
steel that they were made out of was probably not the lightest thing ever.
No, they were pretty heavy bikes.
Yeah.
Pretty heavy bikes.
I was thinking I was just thinking about a group of three or four of you riding these like really
Yeah.
big old bikes trying to do like tricks off of curb. And I was
Yeah.
like, that probably didn't happen.
Go
much.
find a 1940s Sears Roebuck catalog and look at the bicycle pages, and there you are.
Right.
Did you ever get in fights?
Oh, that's a good one. That is a good one.
Did I ever get in fights?
I've never been in a fight, and Pete got
No.
into plenty, obviously.
No. I don't think I ever got in a fight. When I was a kid in New York City, a young kid in New York City, I remember running away from fights a couple of times in school, where kids were a little tough, and I just could run faster than they did, and so avoided it that way. But no, I don't think that. I can't remember ever getting into a fight. No, not at all.
Here's an interesting.
Not growing up
thought.
as a kid.
Okay,
As
but
a
as an
teenager.
adult, just to go a little off topic, but
Well, when you become an adult, you fight with words,
That's actually true.
and
If you're mature,
yeah,
yeah.
I've done plenty of word fighting, and I don't think we need to go there.
that's fair.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you know, with the advent of the internet, everything you say now is, you know, it's saved, like, forever. Like, you know, you think you delete something on the internet, it's still there. Someone has it, you know, it's there in some database. Everything is pretty much recorded. I'm just thinking, how much harder was it to actually really get into trouble, like back when you were growing up? Because I mean, I'm thinking small town, 500 people, probably not the biggest police department, and I'm also thinking that
We had a sheriff down the road a piece.
and I'm thinking that he was preoccupied with bigger problems than to, you know, be,
Yep.
you know, like all the really petty things that I mean, like, I guess I'm just saying, was crime
No, didn't exist in that little town.
really?
No.
What about in New York City?
New York City, I'm sure it was a different thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you're growing up as a kid, you're not aware of it.
Yeah.
I never was aware of it. I'm sure there was. I remember one time in New York City, my brother and I were walking home from school. And I remember that there was a man in a car who came around a corner and wanted us to go for a ride with him.
That's so cool.
And you know, I don't know whether it was a matter of intuition or what, but I was the big guy. I was the big brother, and I probably 8 years old, 9 years old, something like that. And no way. And
Yeah.
I remember we ran home from there.
Did he chase you?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no,
I
he was in a
like,
car. He was in a car, and so you know, and it is once in a while I have thought of that maybe 4 or 5 times in my life, but it occurs to me that, you know, that could have very well have been an invitation into real trouble.
Yeah, that would have been.
And yet I don't know that it was. He may have been really genuinely offering a kid a ride.
It's true.
But I don't think so. It wasn't somebody that I knew or had ever seen before, so probably not.
So,
but in that little town that we're talking about, no, we didn't have that kind of trouble. Crime didn't exist.
well, so Jeff asked, did you get into much trouble? I think really the question that I'm trying to ask is, did you do things that would have gotten you in trouble now, but didn't get you in trouble then? Like, were there things where we would look at them now and it would be like, oh yeah, you could get in a lot of trouble for that,
Well,
but it was just something that you did back then?
I remember a buddy of mine, classmate of mine. His father was a professor on this little college too. He had a big Buick Limited, Buick Roadmaster Limited, 1938, kind of vintage. I can still see the car, and I had never driven, and he had driven. My buddy had driven, and I said, "Boy, I bet that's a nice car to drive." He says, "Yeah, it is." and so we got in that car and drove it, and I drove it. I'd never driven before, but I had a pretty good imagination how to drive, and managed okay, and didn't get in any trouble. But you know, who knows what it could have, what kind of trouble if I just steered the wrong way on this little country street, you know, who knows?
Well, and I mean, were you required to get a license to drive then? Or?
Of course.
But
of course.
how,
I didn't have a driver's license until I was in college.
How old did you have to be to get one?
I think in New York State at that time it was 15 or 16.
Huh.
This is upstate New York where there's a lot of farm country, and you can get driver's license younger out in the country.
To work
That's
on
right.
farm vehicles and
That's
stuff?
correct.
Huh.
That's correct. But and to drive into town with supplies and products and produce and so forth.
Well, and I mean,
We got about 15 minutes, by the way.
okay, and all cars were manual then, weren't they?
There was no such thing as an automatic transmission that any of us knew about, at least in those times. I think the first automatic transmission that really was marketable was about 1940 in Oldsmobile. Oldsmobile came out with one in 1940 or 41. 40, I think, 1940.
So I kind of wanted to touch on something that is actually very relevant to me and a lot of other kids growing up now, and that there's such this immense pressure now on kids to graduate from high school and go straight to college. And I feel like that wasn't as much prevalent when you were in your teen years. I mean, you went to college when you were 17, but I have a feeling that not all of your friends went straight to college and might have been working, part-time, full-time jobs when they graduated from high school. A lot of them might not have even graduated. And I also feel like there wasn't such a negative stigma against not going to college then. Would you care to talk about that?
Sure. I hate to disillusion you, but I think the reality was quite the contrary.
Really?
But don't forget, my father was a college professor,
Yeah.
and all of my friends were college faculty people.
Well, and you lived in a small
my friends
college town,
were
right?
in
Yeah.
college faculty families, because that's all that existed in the town, in that town. And even when I went to the prep school in Massachusetts, as a matter of fact, no question there, even more so, everybody was going to college. Everybody was going to college from that school. So it was quite the contrary. We were in an environment where there was, it wasn't even a question about what we were going to do. We were all going to go to college.
Huh.
And it was just, I just knew right to begin with that whatever education I had to take with me and do the best I could with it. And when I went on to college. But college was a different thing then.
I feel like that is the more distinguishing thing. I feel like college then was more about, less about like the status that you got from a degree and more about the knowledge that you got
Absolutely.
with it and used with it when you left. I feel
Absolutely.
like that is something that we put way too much emphasis on now, and that it would be really interesting to hear about, because I mean not to say that a degree isn't important to get, but I feel like the knowledge that you gain from the degree is more important than the degree itself, and I feel like there was more emphasis back then on.
I agree with you to a certain point. The education is always the most important thing. No
Yeah,
question
of course.
about it. On the one hand. On the other hand, one of the things that you are in, and I was in, we are all in, is a competitive world. And being in a competitive world, the ticket that you have to get ahead in the competitive world requires that if you're going to get to a certain place, you better have the right ticket to do it.
That's true.
The ticket, the college degree, as far as I am concerned, is nothing more than,
A piece of
to be sure, an education goes with it, but is nothing more than the ticket to be accepted as acceptable for having accomplished a certain level of personal demonstration of skill. That's all.
Okay.
And for instance, in my own case, I went to college. I interrupted my college time with the U.S. Army. Came back, got married, still finished college. Took a while to do it. A long while to do it, as a matter of fact. But then I went on in midlife and did graduate work and pursued a doctorate and got all the work done for the doctorate except the last, what they call comprehensive exam. I couldn't take it because I didn't know that I was in a trial curriculum, and they decided to disapprove it. Only one other person had graduated from it, and the university, here's the University of Texas, as a matter of fact, they decided to not validate it as an acceptable degree program. It was a perfectly good one, but I'd gotten all the education that I need, and believe me, I'm using it every day still at 85 and a half.
Sure you are.
I'm using it all the time, and I don't have the doctorate. I don't have the degree.
Huh.
But I got the job because I had it. I had the
You
education.
had the education.
Yes. But they expected me to finish that degree too.
Yeah.
And I never
Never
did
did.
get that degree. But I had meanwhile proven myself. They couldn't care less whether I had a degree or not.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, my boss, the pastor of the church that I served as a musician, said, "My gosh, all these people that have doctorate degrees and you never got yours, they can't do anything near what you can do." And you know, so it's still what you're able to do that counts.
Yeah.
But to get in the door to prove that, you have to
gotta
be at
have
a
the-
certain level of ticket.
That's true.
And there's in this day, I have to tell you, you're in a much more competitive age than when I got out of college
Hell yeah.
and got out of school. It's much more competitive now.
Here's a question.
I'm sorry to disappoint you with my answer.
No, it's
but
fine.
It's
So
really
you
the
gotta
truth.
get it out.
Yeah.
Here's a question that I think I know I know the answer to already, and it's probably going to be a one-word answer. I mean, when I was in middle school, like, drugs started being readily available to me, and alcohol is not a hard thing to come by. Was it for you?
No, it didn't exist.
Exactly. That's what I was
Where I grew up, there was no alcohol.
Yeah.
That town was a dry town.
Was it because
the kind of school that it was.
okay, it wasn't a legal issue. It was just that no one there was interested in.
That's right. That's right.
That's interesting.
It was a culture thing in that town.
And
So there's genuinely no one you ever heard of, like the Spixon boys that stole the
Say it again.
You never heard of like the Spillman brothers or I don't know, any random group of kids that took a car, drove to the next county and picked up booze or anything?
No, never did.
And
If they did, I did not know about it. Now there were college students in that small college that had their own cars. Not very many, because that was really an exceptional time. It was a poor time in our history, and this school was not a rich man's school. So there were people that had cars, but I bet you there was basically none of that, because it was a culture thing in that college environment, that Christian college environment.
that's probably
Well, when did you have your first beer?
I'm sorry?
When did you have your first beer?
When I was in the Army.
Huh.
And it wasn't just beer. I've had some pretty good vodka and some pretty good whiskey and a lot of things when I was in the Army. I had a good time when I was in the Army.
Can we dive into that a little bit more? I know that this is supposed to be teenage delinquency, but if delinquency went into the early 20s as well, then let's talk about it here.
Let's do
That would
it.
be my thought process.
Nobody's brought that up yet before. What do you want to know?
I don't know. I guess
Tell us what we should know.
I remember most of my college, but yeah, I don't know. I guess
Laughs.
it's mostly a joke. But
I might get some interesting answers out of you guys.
oh, dude, I'm full of them. No one ever talks about the time I got taken on by the cops, but that's another. No, hey, we actually didn't get arrested.
That's props to you, dude. That's good work.
Oh yeah, but
Well, there are a lot of things that a lot of us should have been arrested for, maybe at one time or another, and we learned from them, right?
Of course.
Yeah. What's the question?
what's up overseas? What's your best story?
Overseas, what's my best story? I can't believe my best story. And I mean
sounds
this.
really
I
good.
really can't. I worked for a while in the U.S. Army. The last job I had in the U.S. Army was working for a Armed Forces radio service station in Osaka, Japan. And the major who ran the station, who was in charge of the station, had to go to Tokyo from Osaka for something or other, and he wanted to get his car up. He had to go by, I forget, either plane or train transport, but he wanted his car in Tokyo. And here I was 21, I think at this time, maybe 22, possibly 23, 22 I think. And he said, I'll give you a road instructions and I can tell you how to get to where I am in Tokyo, Japan. And I want you to take my car and I want you to drive it to Tokyo and deliver it to me. I have thought about that trip many, many times because I drove that car, an old 1941 Ford or something like that. I've forgotten what exactly it was. I drove that car, and if you know anything about foreign countries, and especially one that you really don't know, you can have all the good instructions that you want, but the opportunity to get lost. There are no such things. This is 1940. This is 1952. There were no such things as super highways. No, not even major highways. Or in Japan, there were just little roads.
Google Maps.
And I got it to him exactly as if, well, of course. But I have thought about that since. The opportunity to have gotten lost, gotten waylaid someplace and just plain in trouble was huge.
It's kind of a miracle.
And still,
you got it too.
yeah, it was a miracle that I made it, and I was put on a train by him. He took me to the train station, put me on a train, and went back to Osaka, and everything was fine. But I have thought of it many times and thought, that has to be one of the craziest, maybe even stupidest things that I ever did. And I did not have to do it. I was just wild enough and crazy enough to think, of course I can do it. I did. But in reflection, ever since then, I've thought, my gosh, it's a miracle that I did it in Japan.
Yeah.
In Japan of those days, and it was still in those days what we call the occupation.
Yeah.
We were an occupying force. And believe me, the Japanese, when
really like
you are the occupier and they are the occupied, it's an awful lot of anone,
Yeah.
an awful lot of shame, which puts you in a very unfortunate position if you ever got into a difficult situation.
That's what I was about to ask. Did
Yeah.
you know any Japanese at all?
I don't anymore.
I mean,
I had an awful lot of use of the language while I
like
was
you
there.
could
Yeah.
scrape by
I was there for 2.5
or-
years.
Wow, okay.
In Japan.
Probably picked it up then.
Yeah, so I picked up a lot.
So, I mean, if you had gotten lost there, would you have been able to ask people for directions?
Probably,
I
probably.
Putting aside all cultural prejudices and, like, I don't want to give you directions.
Doko, Tokyo. This way? This way?
Yeah, so.
Huh. The old sign language business works.
Did you have a Japanese girlfriend?
No, not really. Not really.
Not really. It's not the same. as
No.
That doesn't sound like no.
Did I have some dates? Yeah. But don't forget there are the special services where there were an awful lot of American entertainment and so forth that was available to us. But we didn't hesitate to mingle with the Japanese.
Good to know.
And the Japanese are good people. I learned to respect them a very great deal.
Good.
I still have a very great deal of respect for them. I think that we don't do very well as a country in Asia, and that's a pity. We need to live there a little bit more so we know how to do it.
I mean, I'm just not sure if this is the same as it was then, but now in Japan there's quite a bit of nativism there. It's quite heavily present.
Your father
there.
knows about that.
Exactly.
Because he spent enough time there. Yeah.
On business trips there,
Right.
I mean, you don't have to
Exactly.
spend a whole lot of time there to notice that people there don't really like foreigners.
That's
I mean,
right.
even more than
That's right.
Americans do, which is hard to
That's
believe.
right.
But so, I mean, was that the same back then? 'Cause
No.
Okay.
No, because the state of being a conquered nation puts them in a shamed position, and that's totally different what they are now.
That's true.
They can be extremely assertive now, even aggressive, which was unthinkable for them at that time. Their culture was such that, having been shamed so much, that they just would not be able to be at all domineering in any sort of a way.
So it wasn't that they were rude to you, it was just that
No,
it was just
no.
painful for them
Sure.
to think about it,
Yeah.
that they had been occupied.
But I found them more accepting of a lot of us than I think a lot of people think about. A lot of people talk in conquering terms about the conquered people, but they were good people. And a lot of us, especially those of us who are just lowly GIs, which I was one of them, I really felt like I had a good appreciation for the Japanese people, Japanese culture, and had no trouble. Every once in a while something would happen and I'd get acquainted with a family, and I had some dinners with families and so forth, and it was good. Good, honest relationships.
Bunch of good food, I'm betting.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I think we're
Are we there?
Yeah, we're running out of tape, and
Okay.
this one can go